Monster Hunter is a game about monsters that turn you into mincemeat, but in Monster Hunter Wilds, they are as weak as puppies. Let's cut to the chase and start with the difficulty of Monster Hunter Wilds, or rather, the lack thereof. The gameplay loop of the Monster Hunter series is preparation for hunting vicious, complex monsters that can cut your life short with a few swipes of their claws or fireballs. This preparation includes learning the nuances and movesets of the series' 14 weapons, gathering materials to craft traps, healing potions and buffs, and hunting small monsters to make equipment from their skins to help you survive battles with larger monsters. Then, when the fights start, you'll need to learn how to position yourself properly so you don't miss an attack. After that, you'll be able to learn the monster's attack pattern so that you don't get crushed into the dirt. Preparation is almost unnecessary in Monster Hunter Wilds, however, because 75% of the game is simply too easy. Part of that ease is due to the game's new mechanics, such as focus mode, wounds, and the secret mount. And part of it is due to the poor balance of the enemies you fight. Focus mode allows you to redirect melee attacks in mid-animation so you don't miss. It also allows you to perform special attacks that deal massive damage to wounds and special monster weaknesses that often appear during combat. The problem, however, is that attacking wounds with these blows completely nullifies most fights because they constantly knock monsters down and take away a significant amount of their health. Plus, wounds appear and recharge too quickly, so you'll never run out of chances to stun enemies. Not to mention that there are no risks involved in using these blows, and players can safely abuse them. Even the insanely powerful wire bugs from Monster Hunter Rise had a limited number of uses before recharging with different recharge timers depending on their power. Another new mechanic that oversimplifies combat is the secret mount. This predatory creature will be able to pick you up after you've been knocked down, while also having plenty of invulnerability frames that allow you to heal freely or sharpen your weapon while riding to avoid monster attacks without repercussions. While Sacred isn't as powerful as the two Palamutes in Monster Hunter Rise, which block enemies with status effects, it's still an extremely powerful ability with no downsides. Thankfully, you can freely ignore Sacred and Focus Mode, as they are optional game mechanics designed to make life easier for newcomers. However, even if you completely disregard these mechanics, the monsters in Monster Hunter Wilds still seem so weak and boring. And I'm not just saying this because I'm a series veteran who's been through the most difficult challenges in previous games. I say this because I was repeatedly hit by monsters in this game, and they did little to no damage, even when I was wearing low-ranked gear that I've barely upgraded since the beginning of the game. At best, the strongest attacks of most enemies took about 15% of my health. For those who don't know, quests in the Monster Hunter games are divided into low rank, easy quests that act as a tutorial game, high rank. The game picks up the pace and starts throwing new, challenging enemies at you, while upgrading monsters you fought in low rank to see if you have enough skills to survive without training wheels. Master Rank. These feature the most difficult monsters in the game, but Master Rank is usually added in DLC expansions. But in Monster Hunter Wilds, the monsters have very little health and attack power, even by the standards of the low-rank enemies found in Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter Rise. In those games, low-rank enemies had much higher HP and attack power, requiring equipment upgrades and mastering game mechanics so that the hunt wouldn't last forever. Monsters like Anjanette and Nergigante from Monster Hunter World and Magnamalo from Monster Hunter Rise could deal crushing damage to a low-rank player if they didn't upgrade their gear and take full advantage of each game's mechanics, even for a series veteran like myself. Unfortunately, this situation does not occur in Monster Hunter Wilds. The monsters in the new installment not only have reduced stats, but also their hitboxes, the invisible aura on all characters that determines whether or not an attack will work on them. The hitboxes of enemy attacks in Monster Hunter Wilds have been reduced so drastically from previous games that half the time monsters will unintentionally miss you. At first I thought, oh, it's just low-rank monsters I'm dealing with, and the harder monsters will appear later in high rank. Unfortunately, this non-existent difficulty showed up even in the high-rank quests. I'm not exaggerating in the slightest when I say that I was able to consistently kill over half of the monsters in high rank in less than 10 minutes per hunt with the same low-rank gear I used for low-rank story missions. To make sure I wasn't going crazy, I was purposely taking damage from monsters to see how much damage they were doing and saw that they were barely leaving a dent on my health scale with low-rank gear. I was so frustrated to see that returning monsters like Blangonga and Gravios, who were a nightmare to fight in past games, were practically turned into a laughingstock in the last installment due to their reduced stats in high rank and the focus hit plus wound combo mechanics in this game. The only time I felt any modicum of difficulty and had to upgrade my gear out of necessity was when I encountered the hardened monsters, which Capcom spoilt the surprise about at the PlayStation Presence Play event. Hardened versions of Jindahad, Arkveld, and Gore Maggle hit fast and hard, and they have twice the health of 90% of the monsters to live for more than 10 minutes. I felt like I'd finally found some acceptable challenges to get satisfaction out of hunting. Too bad I had to sit through 40+ hours of mindless combat to do so. Not to mention that 50% of the danger these hardened monsters posed, as well as the entire Monster Hunter Wilds monster list, is negated by the fact that the game constantly holds players' hands for fear of scaring off newcomers. When your character is about to die, the health bar will flash red like an unstable heartbeat monitor, and your companion Palico will scream at you in giant subtitles, constantly repeating, "Watch out," and other similar annoyances. These warning signs compound how weak most of the enemies in the game are, because they rarely show up and constantly ruin the experience with surprise and fear of whether or not an enemy attack will kill you. After all, what's the point of being afraid of a monster's attacks if it doesn't give you warning signs in the UI? When you take away fear, you take away adrenaline. And when you take away adrenaline, you take away the excitement of the hunt, which is what Monster Hunter is supposed to be about. Also, those warning signs are so annoyingly distracting because they take up a huge portion of the screen. Not only did they obscure the view, but they made it hard to immerse yourself in the atmosphere of the battle. Not to mention the fact that these warnings look so condescending, as if the game thinks its target audience can't understand that a giant monster the size of a semi-truck that breathes fire is dangerous. So it needs to constantly distract us to make sure we don't get hurt. Fortunately, I was able to ditch my Palico companion back at base camp so his subtitled warnings wouldn't clutter the screen. However, there's no way to stop the health indicator from flashing without removing it from the UI entirely. If I had to completely ignore almost half of the game's mechanics in order to feel any sense of risk, danger, and challenge for 75% of the game, then the developers have lost sight of what it means to create an interesting action game, let alone a Monster Hunter game. My complaints with Monster Hunter Wilds are not only about the core gameplay loop, but also about the endgame. In past vanilla versions of Monster Hunter games, there was little endgame after completing the main high-rank questline, and you had to wait for game updates or Master Rank additions via DLC, like Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, or re-releases, Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, to get it. Monster Hunter Rise, in particular, sadly ended with the phrase "to be continued," in which players were only able to battle the endgame monsters Narva and Ibushi, later through the game's free updates. Things got even more neglected in Monster Hunter Wilds because it doesn't even have an exclusive high-ranking final boss. If you don't reveal the details, low rank has a special unique monster that you fight as the final story boss, and in high rank you can never fight it again. Instead of a grand final battle against an epic Elder Dragon-level threat that you can only see in high rank, such as Xeno'jiiva in Monster Hunter World, Nakarkos in Monster Hunter Generations, or Dalamadur in Monster Hunter 4, you simply fight Monster Hunter Wilds' flagship monster, Arkveld, as the final boss again. And that's the kind of failure where your base game's high-rank questline ends. There are other things to do in the endgame, such as crafting unique weapons from parts found when killing hardened, and multi-layer armor to satisfy your visual preferences. However, it's not enough to hide the fact that high rank has little content, because you'll be fighting the same monsters again, only with a couple of new additions and no real final boss. On top of that, you build a meta build fans will be saddened to learn that the gear skill system has become regressively limited. In previous games, such as Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter Rise, the end game revolved around collecting jewelry that could be attached to gear to make it powerful and grant unique passive buffs to increase survivability. However, in Monster Hunter Wilds, you're only allowed to attach half of the jewelry to weapons and the other half to armor. This is so that you can change weapons attached to the Secret Mount in the game, and so that you don't have to return to camp to change weapons. However, due to the fact that most enemies in this game are so easy to defeat, I never felt the need to change weapons, and as a result, the equipment skills were unwittingly limited creatively, as we can no longer attach any jewelry to armor or weapons. So, after all that's been said, you might think that I consider this game to be one of the worst games ever, right? As much as I hate this game's flaws, it has some great qualities and a lot of potential. It has some of the craziest monsters I've ever seen in Monster Hunter. I love that the story finally explores the ancient civilization that was mostly a background element in previous games, and most of the new weapon moves that aren't tied to focus mode are very exciting. I also enjoyed fighting the hardened Jin Dahad, as it's one of the few giant siege-type monsters in the series that is actually fun to fight, rather than a boring punching bag that doesn't fight back like Lao Shan Lung from Monster Hunter 1 or Zora Magdaros from Monster Hunter World. Besides, most of this game's problems can be fixed with balance patches in future updates, which I hope will come as soon as the first update that adds Mizutsune in spring 2025. I can almost certainly predict that Capcom will add a version of the final high-ranking boss from the low-rank storyline to the game, much like Monster Hunter Rise added Narva in one of its updates. These balance fixes can significantly increase the health of monsters so they can survive longer, and increase their attack power so they are a threat to the point where they can kill players in a few hits, even in low-rank quests. This difficulty buff will require the use of unique game mechanics, and will reward players for constantly upgrading their gear and crafting items to survive, even when hunting the easiest monsters. In addition, balance patches may reduce the power of focus strikes, so that, while they will still do a lot of damage, they won't stun or daze monsters, and will be able to counterattack the player. This will encourage players to be more careful with focus strikes, recognize when a monster has a safe window to inflict wounds without getting punished, and also allow the player to feel satisfied with their patience. Another balance adjustment Capcom could make is to make wounds appear much less frequently and only after dealing a significant amount of damage to a monster without stopping. If the player stops attacking or doesn't destroy a wound in time with a focus hit, the wound will heal and the player has to reopen it. Hardened monsters and some special monsters in the story already have wounds that work this way, but I want this to apply to all wounds on all monsters. That way, when a wound appears, it will feel like a special event that rewards the player for being aggressive when they risk their life to earn that special window to unleash their focus attack. Balance patches could also add the ability to make the health bar stay normal even when a monster is about to kill you. Additionally, subtitles could be removed from Palico's shout warnings so that they don't leave them camped out. Not knowing which attacks are lethal and which are not would encourage players to be on guard and encourage them to learn monster attack patterns so they can survive and become better hunters. Of course, some issues are unlikely to be fixed by balance patches, such as the limited equipment skill system as it relates to weapon swapping or the confusing Monster Hunter Wilds multiplayer system. We can only hope, right? Monster Hunter Wilds is shackled by fear, but it's only through tough love that we can set it free and unlock its potential. I could go on and on about other aspects of the game that I didn't like, such as the bland and annoying characters, the fact that players are forced to play alone with no way to join other players in multiplayer, the lack of a full-fledged gathering hub to gather players online, the fact that the environment as a whole has a gray, muted color palette, and the not-so-interesting open-world maps. However, these points have already been covered by Jez Corden in his review of Monster Hunter Wilds, and in my opinion, they're minor quibbles compared to the fact that Monster Hunter Wilds dilutes the core gameplay of the series because it's too afraid to let players experience real danger. If there's no risk, elements of suspense or danger in the hunt, then your wins mean nothing because you didn't have to work hard to earn them. I'm not saying that Monster Hunter Wilds should bring back artificial restrictions from older games, like making players stand still while they drink potions, or giving hitboxes for attacking monsters the size of football fields. You just have to trust that a player can overcome challenges on their own terms, whether they're a veteran or a newbie. After all, if violent games like Elden Ring, Dark Souls, and Lies of P enjoy mainstream success from start to finish without holding the player's hand, why can't Monster Hunter? Then again, everything I said in my rant may lose relevance in the future if we do get balance patches addressing these issues as part of titles updates or the inevitable DLC expansions. Who knows? By the time this article is published, there may be a patch released on day one that fixes everything I just complained about. If that happens, I'll gladly accept, ridicule, and prove me wrong if it makes Monster Hunter Wilds better. If you enjoy this game despite its flaws, then don't let my opinion stop you because it has some genuinely fun moments, especially if you play with friends. I'm just frustrated that this game could have become so much more than what it is now. This game has everything it needs to become one of the best Xbox games and the best PC game in the entire Monster Hunter series, and turn into a beast more prominent than Monster Hunter World. However, this can only happen if we let Capcom know what we really think of it through constructive criticism. Only then will the developers know how to improve the game and ensure its long-term success for years to come with hardcore and new fans alike.